Good morning, listeners. My name is Christian.
And my name is Micha, and welcome to the Morning Ponderings podcast.
Season 2. This is a podcast. Sorry. Okay. What were you going to say?
I don't know. I didn't know if you were going to go or I. Then you said season 2, and I was going to be like, yeah, season 2. But then you kept going. I was like, oh.
Okay. From the top? Question mark?
Yeah, let's just try it again.
Good morning, listeners. My name is Christian.
And my name is Micha, and welcome to the Morning Pondering podcast.
Season 2. This is a podcast where we explore the possibilities allotted to us by our limited knowledge and understanding.
And we tend to have a good laugh as well. So welcome back. It's now 2022, and we are back at it now. We took a little short break just for the holidays, and now we're back. Excited to be back.
Here we are. A lot has probably happened because it's been like over a month since we've really talked about stuff.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, there's something going on. You have a bit of a hard deadline towards the end of this episodes because something be going on.
Yes, I do. Before I talk about that, I want to acknowledge that it is sad that my brother is not here. Josiah could not make it this morning, and it's really hard to make our schedules align. But it does happen, and it will happen, and we will definitely have him back on. But alas, here we are. So, at least to give a quick update on my life and why today is special for me is, we just bought a house a few months ago, which I've obviously been talking about because it has consumed my entire life, and it's consuming it less now, which is really great. Yeah, we've actually lived here for not even a month still, but almost a month. And today is the wonderful day that our kitchen cabinets come, and that is just wild. And so that's if we've got to end somewhat abruptly, that is why, because they are coming this morning sometime.
All right. Well, congratulations. I know it really feels nice to finally start to put things in place, and it starts to actually feel like you're home because your furniture's there, and you guys are even customizing it to the extent of getting cabinets.
Yeah.
So super cool, man.
It is. Yeah, and Christian can see this, but obviously the viewers can't. But my background is my entire kitchen because we don't have cabinets currently. It is just an empty room. And so our entire kitchen
is that your kitchen, or is your kitchen a different room and those are just all the appliances and dishware and subware?
This is the guest bedroom.
Gotcha. Guest bedroom / office-ish.
Yeah. / studio, because another thing that I have done recently is, which once again Christian can see, but nobody else can unless you've watched. Well, never mind.
The Russian hacker who happens to be watching.
Yeah. I guess I haven't really posted on TikTok about it. But I built some acoustic panels for this room, and me and my wife built them ourselves, which was super fun. And we had to build them really fast though, because we wanted to put them up before we moved the entire kitchen in here. But they really have helped with the sound, because I think between the last episode and this episode, I think people will be able to tell just vast difference.
Actually, now that you mention it, I think I am noticing that, because I think I remember there being a slight echoiness to some previous audios, and now it sounds really crisp.
Yeah, it was very echoey in here. So these worked. If you want any advice on how to build some yourself and not spend $200 per panel, then hit me up, because I know how to do that, and it's pretty fun.
You could make a TikTok about that.
I could. You gotta have the right tools, but you can do it. It's possible, and they can look really good. There are people who I've watched who've made them, and they look cheap, and some people use a towel on the outside. I'm like, it just looks like it's a towel. These look professional, and so Not to
Or you could
brag,
be
but
exceedingly cheap and save a little bit of time for possibly a lower quality product. And just, if you can, for the Russian hacker who's watching, get these sound panel things that I got off Amazon for like $12 a pack.
the eggshell things, yeah.
Yep.
Well, surprisingly, I was able to make these. I wouldn't say comparable, but close enough that it was not too hard of a decision to make.
And for the higher quality result, even.
Yeah, and I think they look really good too.
Yeah, they look nice. They look
not that the eggshells look
spiffy.
bad. I was about to put eggshells on the entire walls, but yeah.
Yeah, eggshells would seem a little strange, like if we're guest bedroom, especially.
Yeah,
The eggshells, the egg
that's
carton thing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, how's your life been? How did you make it through the holidays and everything?
Went really well. Things went over pretty smoothly. It wasn't like super tense or anything. But because we have such a tight timeline, unless there was some more details, I mean, it's been a whole month, but my brain, speaking of which, I could use some more coffee. It's so tired right now.
Yeah.
That's some hot coffee. Whew. Now I need some water to try and
unburn your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yep. Yeah. Just to, I guess my holidays were a little strange. Just because family member on my wife's side got COVID right before Christmas. Luckily, we knew they had tested, so we weren't really able to do Christmas with that side of the family. And then we were going to have it this weekend, but then 2 other people are sick, and we don't think it's COVID, but they're just sick, and so we don't want to be around them, and so we had to push it back another little bit, and that really sucks because I don't really get weekends off, and I had specifically asked for this Saturday off, and it's like, oh man. Now, I mean, I'm glad I have this Saturday off because I get a real weekend, but it's like, well, I used up one of my
PTOs
asks. Well, I didn't have to use PTO, luckily. They just rearranged. Okay. They just rearranged my days off, but they don't like it when you ask off their busiest day of the week. So
fun.
Yeah, but I think it's gonna work out because for MLK Day I get like a flex day of vacation, and so I think I'm gonna be able to use that to work out
when Christmas. It eventually happens.
Yeah, but and then
Christmas in July.
Yeah, it's gonna be February possibly. Yeah. But Christmas with my side of the family, I think went pretty well, and it was fun to hang out. My parents came up and hang out with my brother. My brother's birthday is on New Year's Eve, and so we always kind of do like a dual celebration for him and then also for Christmas, and so it was fun.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I'm glad that things on both ends went really smoothly, despite the sort of, I guess you could say, emotional roller coaster that our spiritual journeys have been over the past year.
Yeah, still a roller coaster, but
yep.
Yeah. And then now my grandparents have COVID, so it's like, okay, this is great. It's just a matter of time before it gets to me. Hasn't got me yet, but
yeah, my wife and I came down with something just yesterday. I'm still kind of getting over it, but like it hit and then it was like here for a couple hours and then it was gone. It was like, what in the world was that? Like, I don't think it was COVID, because last time when we did have COVID, it like took us out for a whole day, and then recovery was like an entire week long of just fatigue and just terribleness. I think
that's short for most people.
Man, wow. It's the repercussions and like the recovery of COVID that is, in my opinion, the worst part. It's just it'll put you down, and it really messes with like your social needs, and if you work in person in some place, it messes with your work. It's just a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I remember my parents still for like a month and a half after having COVID were still going to bed like an hour early because they were just tired. I was like, man, yeah, I don't want that. But
I started this is a jump of topic, my apologies. But another thing I started doing is I started playing a lot of Apex Legends.
okay,
Are you familiar with the game?
not really.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
like
it's one of those like I don't want to compare it to Fortnite, but it's an online game where you
yeah,
like
it
fight
has a
people and
battle
stuff.
royale mode,
Yeah, yeah.
but it also has like an arenas mode where it's just a team of three versus a team of three, kind of Halo-esque.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
cool, cool.
but yeah, it's free to play and it's been fun. Been playing a lot of that and getting
Nice.
half decent at actually using a mouse and keyboard in a first-person shooter competitively.
There you go. Cool.
Half decent, like on the lower end of half decent.
Nice. It's a hard. I mean, it's a hard skill, I think, but once you get good at it, then yeah, it's pretty cool.
Slowly improving. Just it's like a line like this. Feels like
You
I'll
get
never
there.
actually get there.
Ah, yeah, you get there.
But Micah, if I can't be instantaneously fantastic at it, then how can I ever anticipate ever being there?
Oh man, that is the struggle of life. Oh, okay.
So, should we transition into the topic at hand?
Yeah, I say we dive into it because I think this will
Yeah,
be interesting because I think things have kind of shifted in the last month for me. So,
sweet, very cool.
all right.
Yeah, things have shifted around and been a little crazy too. Like I've had a few paradigm shifts.
We should at least
We kind of
introduce the
already
topic,
started.
I guess.
Yes. So today we're talking about faith and hope and the possible meanings that those have, what they've had for us through our lives, what they have for us now, and how we feel they might be being misused or abused or used correctly, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
And
like
from the sounds, sorry, go on it.
I feel like we've touched on it in different episodes. Like the
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the I don't think the episodes were about that, but we ended up like talking about it a little bit. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to get a little deeper into it and then also see like how the last month has affected us maybe
Yeah,
a little bit.
influence things. Because
Yeah.
from the sounds of it, we've potentially both undergone a little bit of a paradigm shift with regard to faith and its role and all that good stuff. Now, if I do recall, and forgive me if it's weird to bring this up, but previously when I kind of talked about some things I was learning about faith, you felt a bit of discomfort towards that with regard to um, it felt like it was kind of invalidating your agency. If
Just yeah. I think
yeah.
certain definitions of faith feel like they yeah. It almost like and I think that's whenever we talked about determinism was like the next episode because
Mm-hmm.
it like sounded very deterministic of like one definition potentially meaning that like God gives you the faith that you have. And so, in the one sense it's like, it doesn't matter what faith you have cuz like, well, that's what God's given you. So like that is like good and you're valid and everything and like that's great. And on the other hand, it's like, well, I just feel so out of control of this thing that really affects your life. Like faith is
Mm-hmm.
something that affects not just like Christians' lives, but like anybody who has a belief in religion. And anyway, just to me that like felt it felt weird to be like, well, like I have no control over this thing that is like so huge and like will I be I guess, like if you're a universalist it doesn't really matter, but um if you're not, then it's like, well, will I be judged for this thing that I can't control? And I don't know, yeah. So it was interesting.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it totally makes sense that that would be like I totally understand your response. It's totally rational because the way that people talk about faith within Christian circles is it is what is required of us almost.
Yeah.
And like if you don't have faith, then you're going to hell and it's a bad thing and it's terrible.
Yeah.
And something that I've come to learn recently, and I wonder if maybe you've learned something similar, but I learned that faith is actually not what is required of us, and neither is the secular contemporary idea and concept of belief either. Like,
Mm-hmm.
neither of those things from a biblical standpoint is what is required of us, speaking of the Christian belief. Um, because faith itself is just divine persuasion. It is divine revelation. They are one and the same from the word study that I've done. And then
Mm-hmm.
belief in a biblical sense is not like if you do a word study on belief, the words used to define it and synonymously with it are things like confidence and trust. They're not things like absolute knowledge and certainty. And at
Right.
one point, I think I was getting it confused with faith because, of course, you would get that confused with faith with the way Christians talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the belief part is what is required of us, but it's not in the secular like sense of absolute certainty. It's more in the
Mm-hmm.
matter of like the way I interpret it is if you at the very least are able to acknowledge the possibility, that is a portion of belief.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So that was pretty profound for me. It kind of switched around the way that I
Yeah.
perceive Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
specifically like biblical Christianity and not like, popular Christianity.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts are regarding that, and also if it has any relation to what you've kind of unearthed.
Um, I think but belief, whenever I think of belief, I think a lot of, I don't want to say like interchangeably, but I think of the word trust as well. Um, like that is a big, like you don't have to be 1000% certain of something to trust in something or in someone,
Mhm.
right? Like I don't have 100% confidence in friends that they won't let me down or that they won't um or that they will always come through for me, but I trust them and I'm willing to like put that trust in them, and I think that's part of belief, though I know those are different words. um
Mhm.
but I guess talking about portions of maybe what belief can mean, and yeah, anyway, that just like came to mind. But I so for me, I don't know that my recent development hasn't necessarily been from study, but from kind of acknowledging where I am, and um, I guess how I've been living the last few months.
Mhm.
And I've somewhat expressed some of this on TikTok, but like not really, and like talked about it with close friends. Well, brother Josiah, talked about it with Josiah and stuff. But I feel like at where I am right now, I live as though I am an atheist, though I don't think I would call myself an atheist because I still think there could be something
Mhm.
and there could be some divine being, but I don't live as though I believe one.
Now,
And
you
so
might
it's,
clarify because I know that there's a lot of fear surrounding the term atheist and the concept of an atheist. Like a lot of people, unfortunately, as untrue as it is, will hear I've been living like an atheist and think, oh, so you've gotten into cheating on your wife and drugs and living loosely and not caring about ethics whatsoever, huh? Which
yeah.
obviously isn't true.
Right, yeah. That is a very convenient um, stereotype that Christians have given atheists. Very convenient for, I guess, Christians' agenda to, um, I guess, demonize people who disagree with them. But really, atheism, I think, at its core, is just the disbelief in any god. Like atheist, to be an atheist means that I do not believe or I am not convinced that a god exists. And that is not to say that they know a god does not exist, because there's like agnostic atheists, which agnostic means um, is regarding your knowledge. Like, it's like an agnostic would say, I cannot know that there is no God. Like an agnostic atheist would say, I cannot know that there is no God, but I do not believe in one. Same way that like an agnostic Christian will say, I cannot know that God exists, but I do believe God exists. Very
Mhm.
different than saying, I know that God does not exist, or I know that God exists.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people like to pin atheists down as being their own faith, but that is kind of a contradiction to the very definition, which is a lack of faith. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the only reason that it is necessary to have a defining word for having a lack of something is because there are so many people who believe in something that
Mhm.
it's like, hey, don't assume that maybe I'm a part of a religion or have a faith. Like I don't. I'm just
Mhm.
I don't believe in anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of utilizing the more modern understanding and definition of the word faith, even because I mean, if we're talking about biblical faith, that is God making himself known to provide some kind of information or direction. And something
Mhm.
that's like, I think I already kind of said it, but like, I've learned that. So this is something that's particularly interesting. You don't need to have faith. You can have absolutely no faith as long as there's you acknowledge the possibility to some extent, you have an extent of belief from a biblical standpoint. If you say that in using the secular word belief, then it just doesn't make any sense. But but on the flip side of that, you can also have faith and yet no belief. Like God can come to you and give you information and give you direction, but you could scoff in his face and not believe a word of it. And that's kind of based upon different biblical passages where different Bible characters are told something by God and they're like, that can't happen. That's not going to happen.
Mhm.
So if you are a Christian, that is that's kind of the nature of faith. And it's so weird and different than I think Christians understand it. So to try then to apply that, and I think this is where the danger comes because Christians confuse faith and belief all the time. They try and shove the idea of faith onto other people, onto atheists, where you can't really have faith without God giving it in a Christian sense. And
Mhm.
so you can't go around saying, oh, science is based on faith because it's not. You can't go
Right.
around saying that atheism is based on faith because it's not. It's, as you were saying, the lack thereof.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the lack of it. And like, yeah, science is not based on faith, it's based on evidence. Like it is based on
Mhm.
a method that tests things. And like um there's very little faith required for it
Mhm.
because like you can test things over and over again. Um
I think
and
another,
that's yeah.
yeah, go on.
Like
To just real quick to add
yeah,
to what you're
yeah,
saying
yeah.
about science. It's actually very similar, but more intentional to our objective with this podcast in that it explores the possibilities allotted to scientists by whatever information they have, except for
Yeah.
whereas ours is kind of more passive talking about what we know at this present moment, science is actively trying to narrow the possibilities. It's not
Yeah.
it's not something that often uncovers absolutes. Oftentimes it just narrows something down to the one possibility for the time, and then we learn more and suddenly there's more possibilities, and so you have to do more experiments to try and figure out which one it is, and you
Yeah.
might find out that the conclusion you reached before was incorrect.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Or
I think that's
insufficient.
also a misnomer. Yeah, or insufficient. I think that's also a misnomer or a misunderstanding that a lot of people tend to have towards science, and that it is not a matter of absolutes. It's a matter of narrowing possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's why it evolves and changes, like you said, which is a good thing. A lot of people use that as an excuse to not trust science, sadly. Um, but then to me, that's like putting a somewhat ridiculous expectation on science itself. Like it is impossible for us right now, and like especially like if you go back like even just like 50 years, like it would be impossible for them to know things that we know now because for one, a lot of time just has to pass for science to really work. Especially we're seeing that still in this pandemic, like still in 2022, we're coming up on year 2 finishing out. And like there's still a lot that like they don't know because time still has to pass for them to actually know. Like they can't know what is the 5-year or 10-year consequences of this going to be. Like you can make projections and once again rule out possibilities, but you can't actually know until time passes. And I think, well, and that's now just making me think, I don't think this is a tangent, it's part of the topic, but kind of the obsession I find so much with having 100% concrete answers as a part of what I think a lot of Christians say is necessary for belief is having those 100% answers. And so I see a lot, like as Christians in my comments and then also in a lot of other people's comments, coming at people saying, asking questions, trying to get that solid answer of like, okay, well, I don't believe in this. Okay, so what do you think about this? And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know. Like what, how do you know how the Big Bang happened or something like that? It's like, I don't know. If God didn't create the universe, it's like, I have no idea. But me not knowing does not have any bearing on whether or not I'm wrong. Just because you have an answer doesn't mean that you're right.
There is this like really bad tendency to try and invalidate uncertainty as a position that anybody can be in. Like it terrifies people. Like I've talked about how like, I'm comfortable with not knowing, with not having all the answers. But for a lot of people, even the illusion of having all the answers is comforting. And I feel like that kind of almost leans a little bit into the second half of the topic, that being hope. In that a lot of people, even if it's not necessarily something that they have good reason to be certain about, the assumption with the just acting like you have absolute certainty and you have all the answers and you have reason to be certain, it brings comfort, it brings hope.
Right.
And
that is the tough thing, is like there is comfort in, like I think even scientifically in our nervous system, like you can see like there is comfort in feeling like you have all the answers, or feeling, or not all the answers, but at least certain ones, especially feeling like about the afterlife, exactly what's going to happen, or like that like you're good with whatever deity you are following,
or even by proxy, like there's comfort in feeling like your pastor knows all those things and so you can trust them.
Yeah And so I think that's why it's hard to sometimes engage in conversations that look at the nuance and the gray areas and be like, well, I don't know, but like I still want to talk about it, because that takes away some of that comfort of feeling like what is going on and feeling like you have all the answers. It's an uncomfortable place to be for a lot of people. I wonder if, I don't know if I have to wonder too much, but if that's why some people get very angry sometimes in conversations, is because it's almost like you're stripping away some of their comfort, when even if the way you're engaging with it is more honest.
I think that another element of that in particular, I think peer pressure has something to do with it, because I think I remember being very uncomfortable with the idea of admitting that I was uncertain about a lot of things, until I started engaging in conversation after conversation with pastors and academics and students and scholars and the average person. And bit by bit, I started to realize that, wait, nobody has certainty. Nobody has that level of absolute knowledge. And like, I think I was so afraid to admit that I didn't have that, because if other people do have it, that's something that's a deficiency on me. And that means that I failed somewhere along the way. But I was able to eventually come to terms with the fact that I didn't have it. and then have the hope that maybe other people did. And that's what led me to have those conversations. And the more I had conversations with people to realize that I was not alone in not having certainty, the more comfortable that position became, because I started to realize, like, if there is a God, then they probably realize that most people aren't certain. They don't have it all figured out. And so to place that expectation upon all of humanity to achieve that space of certainty or absolute knowledge would be really terrible. Like, that's not a God I feel like is worth believing in or even hoping for. And so as the more I thought about that, like, if there's any hope to glean from the idea of a God, it has to be a God who's going to have mercy and grace for the fact that we don't have it figured out. The fact that we're probably going to have a lot wrong. And so eventually that helped me to make peace with the idea of, like, I don't know everything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have it all figured out, and that's okay. Tomorrow is not a certainty, and that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. And so this just sparked a thought. So tell me if you relate with this experience, and like, one thing that I noticed, because like I very much like you, especially in college, like I found out, like nobody actually really knows. Like everybody has things they're convinced of, and like, different ways they lean on like different topics and stuff. But like, if you really ask people, then like, and they're honest, then they'll say that they don't really know. That's just what they think is correct, right? And so like, I think that's pretty universal, that like most people would admit, like, I don't actually know 100%, but like I'm pretty sure. But what I found, and I find this all over the place, is that language that makes it sound like you are 100% certain is the kind of language that most Christians use. And like, especially pastors, teachers, stuff like that. Like the language they use really implies and really insinuates that they are 100% certain this is the way it is.
And I feel like, sorry, go on.
Yeah, just like, even if if you ask them, like they'll admit, oh no, I'm not 100% certain. But just the way that they talk, like no one would know that unless you ask them.
Yeah, like I totally relate to that. And it's been one of the primary points of discomfort that I've had remaining kind of within the Christian circle, and even still attending a church. There's oftentimes, like, not only is that the language that is used, but that is the language that is expected of you to use.
Yeah.
Like that language will be seated in worship songs.
Yeah.
And it feels incredibly exclusive of anybody who is actually in a place and honest about that place of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like, something I've had to reconcile and wrestle with, and I'm still wrestling with, is it doesn't feel like, biblically speaking, I think I've discovered how there might be a place for someone like me, somebody who isn't certain of the Bible, and kind of nitpicks it, to be honest, because there's things in that Bible that I kind of hope are false. And there've been things historically in the Bible which were false, things which were added, like an entire story of Jesus's encounter with a woman. I can't remember if it's the woman at the well or the adulterous woman, but one of those two. The adulterous woman wasn't in any of the early documents, but it stuck around in the Bible for so long, and everybody thought it was gospel. And I think they're removing it from modern texts because it's not actually there. It was added later by a scribe. So I'm in this place where I'm not certain. And as I understand more and more the ideas, like the biblical concepts of faith and belief, like I recognize, wait a second, even in this place of high skepticism and uncertainty, there could be a place for me there. And I don't know why that's important to me, but it kind of is. I think it's important to me because it's important to my family, and to my relationships, which, I mean, those are important to me. So it makes sense. Definitely. But it's also kind of something I've been wrestling with. Like, is this really a good reason? But anyways, regardless of that, biblically, I find that there's a space for me, but publicly, within Christian circles, within most of the churches I've attended, within most of the communities I've engaged, it doesn't feel like we make any room for people who are honest about uncertainty. And even if, like, we say we do, like something that I've noticed is like, oh, you're okay. It's okay for you to ask those questions and do those explorations. Just do that in private. Do that by
Yep.
yourself.
Yeah.
The youth and the kids, they are not at a place where they're able to handle that. And it's like, well, me talking about what faith and belief really mean and talking about how it's okay to be uncertain from a biblical context is, how is that any different from you teaching about your interpretations and understandings of the Bible? Like,
Yeah.
it's just you saying, oh, I don't like what you've learned. I don't like what you have to say. What I have to say is more important. Kids aren't allowed to be uncertain and have doubts, so you have to be quiet.
Yep.
It's okay that you're there, but you have to be quiet. And it's still super exclusive. It's still very alienating.
It is, and it teaches. I mean, speaking of like youth and stuff, like it teaches them a really bad lesson that once again, like, it's perpetuating the whole cycle of like people feeling like they have to have the right answers. And if you honestly believe that, like, if you honestly believe that like people don't have to have all the answers, then actually you should model that. Like, if you
Yeah.
like telling people to like go, which like I've been told similar things, like to go figure out your stuff quietly, like don't talk publicly about your doubts and stuff. Then like you are perpetuating the horrible cycle that is like people feeling like they need to have all the right answers. And
yeah, and not only that, but I feel like that contributes towards what we're seeing. I think it plays a significant role in the movement away from Christianity in general, because eventually you grow up and you exist in this space of like living fakely, like saying, oh yeah, I've got the answers. Oh yeah, I'm absolutely certain. Oh yes, I know that Jesus did this.
Yeah.
Your whole life as a kid, because that's what you need to do. Otherwise, your parents are going to get very upset and they're going to be terrified for you and you're going to never hear the end of it. And then finally you're free of that and you're like, I don't have to lie anymore. I don't have to be inauthentic to myself anymore. Some people still feel like they need to, but a lot of people recognize that, like, wow, that was just a big charade. There's actually no space for me and there's never been. So I'm just going to leave.
Dang. Yeah.
Why would I stay?
Ooh, that is so true. Like when I was a youth pastor, like went to a virtual youth pastor conference. And I remember one of the big things they talked about when, like, you know, how to minister to Gen Z, which I just like now kind of cringe a little bit. But one of their big things was like they are craving honesty and authenticity, and like they can smell it from a mile away. And it's like, I bet, you know, to some extent, every generation kind of has like wants that, but like I think maybe specifically this generation really wants that, and like I think that's so amazing. And one of the things that I now look back and notice is like, it's like they know that they want authenticity, but they will still do anything to like look as authentic as possible without being authentic. It's like be almost completely authentic, but just don't go to certain spaces like doubt and like your questions, like don't go there. Like, but get really close to it. Like, it's always like you get really close to it, but you're still faking it. And like, it's almost like just finding more creative ways to do the charade, like as you said. And people get sick of it because like eventually when you stop playing the charade, you realize just like how intricate it's just a charade. It's like, I just want to live authentically. And if I can't do that in your community, I'm not going to be a part of it. And that is definitely true for my story. That's not my whole story, but like, that's a big part of it, is like, I could not live authentically in the church. Like, there was no space for me, to do that. They would reject me. And so like, and I see that as like a big movement in the evangelical church. Really the white evangelical church is like that push for everybody to have those answers, and they're still pushing for it. And like, still, it's a very like kind of authoritarian structure of like, this is the answer. Our leader says this, you better fall in line. If you've got questions, ask them quietly, but get back in line. Like, you can ask the questions, but you better get back in line.
It's okay to question as long as you arrive at the same answer, the same conclusion.
Which means there's no point in questioning. Like, there's no point, except to.
And if you don't arrive at that same conclusion, ooh, that's bad. That's bad news.
That's bad news. Yep, you're going to hell. Bears. Like, you're just. It's so extreme. Like,
there's also this mentality of like, which I mean, to some extent, I feel like this is an unhealthy way of talking about it, but there's a healthy way to talk about it. But something I've heard from a few people is this whole idea of like, doubt your doubts. And it's like, doubt your doubts. Okay. I mean, honestly, I think a better way to do that and apply that is to just recognize the difference between what you know and what's a possibility.
Yeah.
And so long as you don't mix up what you know from what is possible, then, I mean, you won't. Because the whole mantra of doubt your doubts seems to assume that, oh, your doubts are belief. Your doubts are something that is, there's this tendency to mistake reasons to be uncertain for reasons to believe in the negative.
Yeah.
And I think that mantra of doubt your doubts buys into that a little bit. And that's where I feel like it gets unhealthy. Whereas so long as you recognize reasons to be uncertain as reasons to be uncertain, and you don't mistake them for knowledge, or you don't mistake them for conclusive whatever, like, I think you're going to be in a safe place. And I don't have to worry about doubting my doubts because I recognize what is possible. And I try my best and I actively work to make sure that I'm not exclaiming that I absolutely know something that I don't have a clue about, that I'm actually uncertain about.
Yeah, to me, it sounds like very gaslighty, which I don't think we really talked about gaslighting in the podcast. So, like, if you don't know what gaslighting is, let me look up the definition just so we can be on the same page here, and then I'll explain why I think it's gaslighting. At least the way that I have seen it be used. Gaslighting is, that's a colloquialism. Wow, that's a big word. Basically, it's loosely defined as making someone question their own reality. And so it's like somebody says, like, this is what I am feeling. And then somebody responds with basically trying to make you doubt that feeling. Like, it's like, oh, I'm not feeling safe right now. I don't think this is a safe situation. And then them saying things to try to manipulate you into doubting yourself and doubting that, like, no, you should feel safe.
It's like saying, like, no, you feel safe. You're safe.
Yeah, part of it is like trying to make you feel crazy or like unreasonable, and so like that's kind of what gaslighting is. And so anyway, I
think the way I've seen it like incorporated is you're telling somebody else what they think and feel.
Oh, for sure.
Even if they're telling you that they think and feel the opposite, you're just completely invalidating that and telling them what they should think and feel.
Yeah, and that they're crazy that they think that they feel that way.
Yeah, that's weird and unnormal.
Yeah, gaslighting. And so to me, doubt your doubts, at least the way I've seen it be used, is basically could be interchanged with doubt yourself. And like, you have doubts about something. Like you were saying, it is perfectly okay to be uncertain about things and to, once again, recognize possibilities and have those doubts. But to say to doubt your doubts is to saying, like, to me sounds like you're gaslighting yourself and like, oh, you should doubt that you should be uncertain, and you should to me it sounds like a way to like, oh, stop that, like stop doubting, like. And once again, I think that just draws you away from living authentically and like being honest about.
I want to because I have a feeling this is going to happen. I want to call out some of our audience. If you're hearing what Micha is saying and you're saying, but that's not what doubt your doubt means, that's not what I mean by that, you need to recognize, like, when you say it to somebody, the way you intend it might not be the way it's received, and the way it's received is more important than the way you intend it. So what you're hearing from Micha is the way that it comes off to him. And that is completely valid. That is something that you need to take into account and change your vocabulary. Maybe be more, instead of just throwing out a catchphrase, maybe have a deeper, more meaningful conversation. and then you won't leave somebody feeling gaslit.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, no, that's a good distinction. I mean, that I think that happens all the time, and is you say something, your attention does not always go through, and it sometimes becomes the opposite. But
Mm-hmm.
it is important to recognize that and understand that happens all over the place. So like, it's not necessarily your fault, but you are responsible for correcting that. But hopefully you don't tell that to just anyone, but it's people that you can have a deeper conversation about.
Definitely agree.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about hope and kind of its space, and a little bit about how, like, as I learned about how uncertain everybody is, it brought me a little bit more hope and peace with regard to my uncertainty, that I believe if there is a God worth hoping for, that they would have grace for that. What other things have you been finding hope for in this new chapter of life? And as things have transitioned, one of the things I was told by somebody was that they felt they struggled to listen to our podcast because they felt like it was devoid of hope. And I kind of get that, because it's kind of dismantling a lot of structures that people find hope in. And so I think it'd be a good idea to kind of like talk a little bit about those things that bring us hope in this new place, in this place of uncertainty, in this new chapter of life, which is so probably unfamiliar for a lot of listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, hope is not something I guess we talk about a lot. I think, when processing things that can be painful a lot of the times, they're I guess it's easy to lose sight of hope. I think some of the things I hope for as I continue to journey on this is like, let's just say things that bring me hope. I don't know about things I hope for, but
Yeah.
like as I left, I had been convinced that Christians were the good guys, right? That they were the ones who were the good in the world. And not to say that Christians don't do any good in the world, because I definitely don't believe that. But
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of harm coming from the thing I used to find hope in. And then meeting people outside of the bubble that I lived in and finding there are very good people outside of this, very kind, loving people who are doing a lot of really good in the world. That brought me hope that goodness is something we find in all of humanity, and that like you can find anywhere. Like you can find great Christian community, you can find great Buddhist community, you can find great atheist community. Like there are good people out there who are wanting to make this world better. And so I think like that gave me hope that like I I had been in the bubble of certain sects of Christianity that believed that the world was mostly evil. The world was going to hell in a handbasket. Um, and I think coming out of that and finding just so many people who really just want to do good in the world gave me hope that the world is not mostly evil, and that if you look for it, um, really, really the idea of like what you seek, you will find. If you seek all the ways the world is horrible, you're going to find that everywhere. But if you find if you look for all the ways that the world is good and moving towards progress and moving towards love and peace, you're going to find that. And that's given me a lot of hope.
Yeah. I feel like I've noticed something very similar, in that there are commonalities that I see in people who are at work for good in the world and who live lives that are life-bringing. And that commonality isn't any one religion. It's not Christianity. It's not any particular set of beliefs. In fact, I've seen that this commonality is not present in some Christians, but that commonality is a acceptance of this, what feels like an invitation that we all like have somehow within us to live intentional and redemptive lives. Like,
yeah,
if you think about what we admire in the world, you look at art, and the greatest artists are the ones who understand their medium enough to be intentional with it, to make, like, to perform some incredible act of intentionality. And we look at that, and that's what we admire. That's what we love. That's what we crave and need, is that some level of intentionality. And if it's art without intention, then it's just noise, and we don't really care for it so much.
Yeah.
So there's something within us that longs to be intentional. And that, I feel like, oftentimes is at odds with like our carnal desires and our carnal urges or whatever.
Sure.
So the people that I see who do a lot of the most good in the world tend to be people who are bent on being as intentional as they can towards whatever ends that they're trying to do. But of course, you can be intentional in a bad way. I feel like intentionality is one of those things where it's like it can cause just as much harm as it can good.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's important to acknowledge the other half of that, and that is being intentional towards redemptiveness, being intentional towards redemption. And I feel like I think of redemption as like bringing out the good in people, or maybe the good that's been lost or forgotten in the world, and bringing out the potential of the world and of biology and the sciences. And so it's so interesting to me how that's something that I feel permeates every culture, every group of people. There are people who are intentional towards redemption, but at the same time, like in Christianity, for example, there are people who will become so dependent and desperate for God to just do all the work that they will give themselves over to inactivity or mistaking their carnal urges and desires for God's will, and just end up doing horrible, terrible things, or just letting horrible, terrible things happen because God's not telling them that they should stop it. Yeah. And so I feel like if you go too far in an extreme, either way, just giving into your carnal desires completely or just waiting for a deity to tell you what to do, you lose that intentionality. You lose that contribution towards a redemptive future. And it causes pain and it causes suffering. And so I feel like where I find hope is seeing that truth. And also, as I learn more and more, recognizing how little I know and how little everyone else knows. So the more I understand that, the less I feel like it's important for us to all have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And that brings me a lot of peace. And recognizing that good in life come from living intentionally and redemptively. I feel like that's all I really need to know, is I should do my best to live intentionally and redemptively. And I shouldn't get so caught up in needing to be right.
Right. Yeah.
To kind of summarize that whole spiel.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good stuff. I do want to clarify for some of our listeners, like, and I don't think you're saying this, but like our like natural, I guess, carnal desires are not always bad. I think that they are inherently neutral, but they can, if you know, it's one of those things of like controlling those and like understanding that some of those desires will lead us to not great places. And so like kind of like what you were saying, but I at least see our like natural desires as neutral, but then the effect of those desires is what then I guess you could then start talking about ethics and morality.
I thank you for that clarification, because I totally agree with you. Like, I agree with what you're saying.
Sweet. Yeah. I definitely agree that like the idea of not having to have all the answers gives me a lot of hope. And that was like thankfully kind of before I moved to this place of not being convinced in definitely certain versions of God, but possibly any God at the moment. Not that I'm not open, because I am, and I'm just kind of like waiting for signs, I guess. But I'm glad that I kind of had already deconstructed a bit and become like a universalist to the point where it's like, you know, I don't think we need to believe a certain thing for God to be good with us. Because like we talk about a lot, like you can only know so much, like, and you can only be certain about even less. And so I don't think God is going to judge me eternally for that and for asking these questions. And so that kind of helped me a little bit in this transition of going to like, well, right now No idea.
Yeah, speaking of that, like, I think another thing that brings me hope is recognizing, like, if you really stop and listen to people's stories, and especially those who have walked away, you will hear that they talk about how, like, yeah, those things in my life, which I thought were like God at work in my life, they still happen. Like, they're still occurring in my life to this day. So that either means that God doesn't exist and they just happen, or God doesn't care. God doesn't care about what you believe. He doesn't care about where you're at. He cares about you. And he's going to be active either way. One of those two possibilities, maybe there's more possibilities. I don't know.
Yeah, probably more, but like still, yeah, that has given me hope as well. Cause like I've seen that where like moments have happened where it's like, man, normally I guess when I was a Christian, like I would have totally 100% said that was God right there. There's evidence. But now it's like, I didn't pray about that at all, but that just happened. And that was really, really nice that happened. And like, that gives hope too. Like, I guess just coincidences and like, good things can still happen to you and you can still be happy and like enjoy things. That gives me hope as well.
Yeah. Over the course of deconstruction and life changing so much, I don't feel like the ratio of bad things to good things in my life has really changed all that much. If anything, I think things have gotten better over time, even though there's crazy things that happen with like the car and all that kind of stuff, the air conditioning. But I mean, even before everything started to deconstruct, like there was a period of time when like within a year, I don't know if it was just the roads or if it was something about my wife's car, but like we popped like 8 tires on that thing.
Oh my.
Right? It was,
oh my goodness,
I mean,
what?
it was a mess, man. It was really, I don't know how that happened, but there was that. And then there was also a period of time when we were both like working jobs that barely got us by. And over time, we were just starting to accumulate debt because we were trying to get by and our jobs weren't enough. I mean, there just been trials around every corner, but there's also been wonderful, fortunate things to happen as well to come along. So, I mean, that all hasn't really changed. And that brings me some comfort, I guess.
And that like during those like very hard times, you know, obviously I very much leaned on my faith to get me through those times. And it's like now that I don't have that to lean on, at least for me, like I still can find hope and comfort and things to lean on to get through those things. Like when hard things and like crazy stress comes up, like it is possible to get through that. Not the same methods that I used to use, but I could still get through them and be okay. And like that also brings me hope.
Yeah, I think something that I came to terms with, like even before things really started to construct, or maybe it was like as a part of my deconstruction, and that was this idea of like, you know, I don't feel like it's worth believing in a God that shows his favor through blessings. Because, I mean, that would just be a real jerk God, that there's people in this world who don't have anything, haven't even had like 2-year-olds in the world who haven't even had enough time to like make any major decisions, who are being hurt and abused and starving. It's like, I feel like I disconnected God's favor from the good and bad things that happen in life a long time ago. Not to say that that means that none of the good and bad things that happen in life God has his hand in that pot at all. And I'm still just trying to make sense of all that and wrestling with it. But like, who knows? Maybe, I mean, as a game designer, I can have systems in place that help people out, but don't necessarily play the game for them. I don't know. That's something I'm still just trying to mull over and constantly wrestling with in my mind of like, how in the world can there be a God that is good in this context? And I can think of some possibilities, namely like if they're not omnipotent, all that kind of stuff. But even in the circumstance of omnipotence, like my wife and I keep having this conversation over and over again where she presents this really interesting and cool possibility and I always forget it. And so we'll probably have the conversation yet again. But my wife is incredible when it comes to like thinking of possibilities and like exploring those. Like we should have her on the podcast sometime if she'd be willing.
Hey, she could come on here, I guess. You need another mic.
But she could just sit next to me.
That's true. I guess that's how that works as well. That does lead me to, I think, maybe an interesting tangent of hope is like different things that not just things that bring us hope, but things that maybe we hope for. Because I was also thinking of that, and you've talked about like your bag of hoping and like different possibilities that you hope for, and so I have been thinking about that and like in relation to faith and belief and potential divine being, like what would be things that I hope for. And I think you just now talking about like a God who shows favor through like blessings and stuff made me think of kind of a God I don't hope for as well. Is like, because I think even beyond, I guess what you'd call blessing is like God blessing people with like privilege and like being born into like a wealthy family. Like that is a privilege, and like you have a lot of privilege for that, as opposed to like being born in a like very poor community or like a family that kicks you out, like that. Are you cursed then? And like I really hope also with you that a God like that does not exist, because I think like it's so hard, because like in thinking of what I would hope for, I do hope that there would be an all good being that can like work in the world and like is driving us all towards good and towards love. And I don't know, like I don't know how much, like how powerful that God is, but I do hope that God isn't just like blessing some people with a wealthy family and cursing others to not have that, or to even say that like, man, like when people say like, oh, but this will just make you stronger, like your story will be so great. It's like, do you have to live a really sucky life to have a great, like, is that necessary? For God to orchestrate that for me?
And what about all the 2-year-olds? Trigger warning. I'm sorry. We should probably say trigger warning. What about all the 2-year-olds that are abused to death? Like,
yeah,
what is the point of that? Like, they're not going to get to tell their stories, and yet they have to experience this time of extreme suffering. And
right.
I don't know.
It seems pointless. Yeah, it seems.
It does. That's
like
one thing I come up
senseless.
against oftentimes, especially considering the possibility of an omnipotent God, is like, what is the point of this life and this existence? Why not, like, wherever this life is headed, why not just start our existence at that destination, whatever this life is meant to achieve? And, I can kind of somewhat make sense of like, maybe there's an omnipotent God, and maybe the plan is that this life in this world isn't necessarily going to just pass away pointlessly, so much as it is like maybe we are all stuck in this eternal cycle of did you lose me? Did I lose you?
I can hear you, but your video's gone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. My video likes to just keep turning off for some reason. But maybe we're just going to continue to, maybe we reincarnate. Maybe we just continue to reincarnate into this world, into different circumstances and situations. And everybody in the world is just kind of in this cycle. And then the world is going to just progressively get better until it is that kingdom of God. And maybe that's the reason why this world is the way it is. I don't know. And maybe that's where the justice is. Maybe those people who suffered extremely in their lives before they passed away will be reincarnated into a life that's a lot more ideal, a lot better. Yeah. And we all kind of take that turn. Or maybe we're all just one collective consciousness, and it's just this relationship between human as a collective and God. And so every experience in this world is your experience. And so maybe by the end of it, we'll have garnered enough of those experiences that it'll just ultimately make us a better person in the end. There's a bunch of different possibilities to consider.
You just
so I can't necessarily throw omnipotence out with the bathwater, but it's still one of those things that's like, it's iffy, regardless of how you put it. Because I mean, in the end, you're trying to justify suffering. And there's a
Right.
lot of really bad suffering out there. So it's like, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable to say the least, even if it's
Yeah.
necessarily possible.
Yeah. There's a lot of possibilities, and yeah, that you know, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, and I'm not in any place to justify that unless this world is just spinning and like it just um
Hmm.
and there is nothing out there. There's nothing
Yeah.
beyond. And so it just happens because it happens. There are times where I hope for that, like when I guess talking about
Yeah.
like suffering things, but then there are other times where I don't hope for that. Um,
Yeah.
and I hope there is something that connects us all and something that is bigger than us. And I think that's
Yeah.
an important distinction, I guess, like talking a bit about, faith, hope, belief is like you can hope for something and not believe it, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
like those don't have to go together, but you also can believe in something and hope for it too, because I think maybe hope also falls in the spectrum of like, where like belief and like faith can go on the spectrum of like having little faith or a lot of faith, little belief,
Hmm.
a lot of belief, like a lot of
Yeah.
doubt, and hope I think also can be on that, where it's like, I guess if you believe a lot in something, you don't have to hope as much because you kind of
Hmm.
are fully believing it already. But
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you could say like, I mean, I think I've heard people talk about how like, yeah, I hope for this, but I hope for this more. And
yeah,
that's like
yeah,
it's not a weird sentence to say. The yeah, the whole concept of like the bag of hoping. Um, and for those viewers who are like, what is this bag of hoping?
yeah,
Essentially, I have this mental space for possibilities that I hope for. And sometimes those possibilities can be completely juxtaposed. Like, for example, under certain circumstances, I might hope that the God doesn't exist. But under other circumstances, I might hope that a God does exist. Specifically talking about like an omnipotent God, I guess, in this case, where like sometimes it's really hard to reconcile with like, if an omnipotent God exists and these things can happen, like what does that say about the character of this omnipotent God? And does that sort of character uh, does that actually bring hope? Do I even
mm,
want that kind of God to exist? So maybe I
yeah,
don't hope that a God like that exists. Like
yeah,
I can wrestle with that. But under other circumstances, it's like, man, humanity sucks. I'm really losing faith in humanity right now. I kind of hope that there is a higher power that's at work for the good of this world because we are going to fail hard
yeah,
and we are failing hard. So I
yeah,
kind of hope that
yeah,
there is a higher power at work. Uh, and it kind of can go back and forth, be circumstantial, situational. Um, but essentially, in order to be in the bag of hoping, the thing itself has to be possible. If I know it for certain, it's not in the
mm,
bag of hoping. It goes into what I call my pool of knowledge. And I would consult that first. I consult the pool of knowledge before I consult the bag of hoping. And if I find no hope or no answers in the pool of knowledge, then I turn to, okay, well, what possibilities are in my bag of hoping that can bring me hope in this otherwise hopeless situation?
yeah.
So that's kind of the nature and function of the bag of hoping.
Wow,
Yep.
nice. Yeah, this is so change of topic, but everything you said just made me think of this. Have you ever heard of like I don't know if this is what they're called, but this is what I'm gonna call it now, a mind mansion?
A mind mansion. I feel like I have somewhat familiarity with that concept via one of NF's songs.
Okay, maybe different than NF song. But
Okay.
it's basically one of my friends was talking about ways that people like can memorize things and memorize a lot of information. And one of the ways they do that
Mm-hmm.
is they create a mind mansion that either is just solely in their mind, where they construct like rooms and a hallway and like all this stuff, or they like actually like draw one up, or like me and my friend were making one for him in Minecraft. And like then what you do is like for different things you want to memorize, you create rooms, and like for that thing you give it an object, like this is the couch, and then you associate that information with that item. And so then if
Mm-hmm.
you want to remember it, then you in your mind walk into that mansion, walk into that room, look at the object, and like something about that like connects and like helps you memorize things like really, really well. And like you talking about your pool of knowledge and then like your bag of hoping just like made me think like you could build a mansion with all this stuff. Like you got a pool already. Like, but anyway, somebody should look that up, and I'm curious to know. Well, I could look it up now, I guess, but like what it's actually called.
Yeah,
but it's a fascinating concept.
I actually am familiar with that. I think I should probably use that concept more often, but I used it once to try and play this one game where it's like you have to work your way through the alphabet or something and be like, oh yeah, I walked into my house and there was a antelope. And then the other person adds something, and then you go, I walked to my house and there was an antelope and a banana and then you add a C word, and then they add a D, and then they
and
you just keep going, like, and you have to try and memorize
games.
the whole thing.
Yeah. So like that, but now you're like, you've got upper floors and lower floors, you've got bedrooms, you've got game rooms, and like there's stuff in all of them. And like I think to me that sounds like a lot of work to try to create a mansion, like, because then me personally, I'd be trying to like decorate that mansion in my head, but then I'd forget different things, and like I'd be like, oh, but what if I put the couch over there? It's like, it doesn't even matter. I'm just trying to memorize information. Like
you just put a random curtain up, and then you walk in your house and you're like, why is that curtain there? And it's actually there for no good reason. You just like
I just thought a curtain would look nice. Yeah.
Now you're stumped because you're like, this has to mean something. What am I forgetting?
I can't remember. Yeah, I think I would go crazy if I tried to create one of those in my head. So it works for some people, and that's great. I hope it works for you. It is called a mind mansion, actually. But anyway, if that's something you're interested in, it's a fascinating concept.
For all of our college student listeners, here you go. You've received some really important life advice from listening to our podcast. This is the value we bring.
Yeah, you can make a whole neighborhood for all the stuff you got to memorize.
There you go.
I think this was a very good topic to start out the year with, and kind of, kind of start where we are in this new year of 2022. That another thing I hope for is hoping that this year is better than the last two. But
of course, and that's actually a pretty low bar to overcome. So
yeah, pretty low bar. But
if it happens to be worse, then oh my goodness, we are in for some. We're in for something.
Yeah, well, I think we are in for something, but let's not go there. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I encourage listeners to be reflective and like, I think it's important to think of what you hope for and like things that bring you hope, especially amidst if you're deconstructing like a very turbulent time where you're kind of questioning everything. And I hope that some of the things we said gave you hope, just talking about like, you don't have to have all the answers, and nobody does. And even though that language is baked into a lot of belief systems, that doesn't mean you have to adopt that as your own. And so, yeah, good talk.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. I missed these. I'm looking forward to season 2.
Season 2, yeah, and we'll get Josiah back on, and who knows? Maybe we'll try to have a guest or two. If we're feeling ambitious, and just see where this year leads us.
Yeah. So, Micha, where can people find us?
So you can find me at Pondering Together on TikTok, and that is really my main and only platform at the moment, though I do have plans for the future. Like, I'm still making that album, though obviously it's been on hold. Still making that, and then I also have some ideas for another thing that I will not disclose because it's still just a concept. But Christian,
all right.
What about you?
I mean, my TikTok is still private, and I'm not really making content there at the moment. I'm kind of doing some reassessment of like how I want to be more intentional with the content I produce, and I was being as intentional as I could with the information I had when I was making my TikToks, but they were not having the effect I was hoping they would.
Yeah.
So it's still in private mode. If you want to follow me there, you can send a request, and I might accept it if I feel like I don't know you personally and it won't come back to bite me in the butt and cause more drama for my wife to have to try and take care of. Um, but otherwise, you can find me here. I made a video game forever ago called Zanpao 2 if you want to take a look at that. It's on the App Store and Google Play. It's an okay game. Yeah, you can support us. There's a link in the description of every episode. And if you want to leave a comment or engage with us, you can do so on the YouTube version of this episode or other episodes where we can receive comments. And also, you could totally leave us a review. That would help us a lot. We'd appreciate it.
For sure.
On whatever platform you're listening on. So,
and go find Josiah, who is at Something Matters on TikTok. Though he is not here, we still recognize him and say, go follow him because he's a cool guy.
He's a super cool dude. For those who don't know, he's Micah's bro.
He is.
And he's a regular, like, I don't even know if we can call him a guest at this point, but he's like a regular host of the show with us. So
he is indeed. All right.
Yep.
Well, with that, thank you all for listening and hope to talk to you all in a couple weeks.
All right. Hope to talk with you in a couple weeks as well. Everybody, have a great day.
Have a good one.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well,
I had a thought and it fleeted.
It has fleeted. It do fleet.
It done did a fleet.
Yeah. Well, we could also just wrap up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. All right.